Picture this. You're out plowing a field, minding your own business, when suddenly, right out of the dirt, springs a surprisingly wise boy. What do you even do? Well, according to the Roman orator Cicero, that's exactly what happened to a farmer in central Italy. This boy, named Tagus, emerged from a freshly plowed furrow. He had the physical features of a child, but the profound, deep wisdom of an ancient sage. And instead of just ignoring this incredibly strange phenomenon, the locals gathered around and furiously transcribed every word he said. This totally bizarre origin myth ended up delivering the foundational wisdom of the Etruscans to a shocked farming community. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to spend some time demystifying the Etruscans. If you don't know much about them, they were this highly sophisticated, incredibly wealthy ancient civilization that ruled central Italy for over 700 years, starting right around 900 B.C.E., so way before the Roman Empire became the massive force we know today. Their literature is entirely lost to us, and their culture was eventually absorbed, but what they left behind reveals a society absolutely obsessed with uncovering the hidden blueprints of the universe. Because this society was so wonderfully complex, we're going to use a quick roadmap to navigate through their world. We'll start with the boy in the furrow, then figure out who were the Etruscans. After that, we'll dive into their art, mirrors, and mystery, zoom out to the Etruscan cosmos, explore how they went about divining the god's will, and finally look at the fall of Etruria. Let's jump in. Okay, part 1, the boy in the furrow. This is where nature really meets the city. So the crucial takeaway from the myth of Tagus is that the wisdom he dictated became known as the Etrusca disciplina. Think of this as their definitive, almost obsessive guide to divining the god's will, all aimed at forcing a perfect harmony between nature and the city. But here's where it gets really fascinating. The archaeology actually backs this up. In the city of Tarquinia, archaeologists uncovered a 10th century B.C.E. burial of a young boy, right around the time these city-states were first emerging. The remains showed this boy was an albino and very likely suffered from epilepsy. Now, in antiquity, having seizures was often viewed as a sacred, oracular affliction, meaning people thought you were literally seeing divine things that no one else could. Historians argue that this real boy, buried in a place of heavy ritual importance, might actually be the real-life historical basis for the legendary Tagus. No way, right? Moving right along to part 2. Who were the Etruscans? Or as they called themselves, the Rasenna. Zooming out to their society as a whole, the Etruscans built these thriving, fully independent city-states all across modern-day Tuscany. And they were huge for the time, boasting populations of up to 40,000 people. They had a powerful navy, immense wealth, and heavily influenced early Roman governance and architecture. But this brings us to the absolute biggest mystery about them, the language barrier. Get this, they actually gave the Romans the alphabet that we still use every single day, borrowing it from Greek settlers. But while their script is totally familiar to us, their language is a pre-Indo-European isolate. It's related only to the super obscure Ticenian language family. That means we have something like 13,000 surviving inscriptions, and yet we simply cannot translate what they actually mean. The script doesn't make the language, which leaves their deepest, most intimate thoughts locked away in time. Which brings us to part 3, art, mirrors, and mystery, the sacred act of creation. So the Etruscans loved to flaunt their massive wealth by importing luxury goods from Greece, and you can clearly see Greek art heavily influenced them. But the Etruscans were fiercely unique. For instance, unlike the Greeks, who, let's be honest, absolutely loved a good naked statue, the Etruscans much preferred their beautiful terracotta statues to be fully clothed. They also invented their own completely stunning utilitarian art, like this beautiful Bucchero pottery. It's characterized by this highly glossy, completely pitch-black finish with delicate incisions, but almost no paint. It's moody, distinct, and entirely their own thing. But I have to say, my absolute favorite artifacts of theirs are these breathtaking engraved bronze mirrors. They usually feature incredibly intricate mythological scenes on the back. Honestly, think of these mirrors like the ancient equivalent of a smartphone. Today, we are just constantly bombarded by our own reflections. But back then, seeing an image of yourself was incredibly rare. Owning one of these mirrors was a massive status symbol, especially for Etruscan women. In fact, they were so highly valued, both monetarily and sentimentally, that when a woman died and was buried with her mirror, an inscription was violently scratched onto the reflective side to essentially kill the mirror. They literally broke its function so it could join its owner in the afterlife. All right, part 4. The Etruscan cosmos, a highly segmented sky. Let's zoom all the way out to the Etruscan religion. It was so obsessively systematic that it made the Romans, who, keep in mind, were so deeply superstitious they rubbed spit behind their ears to ward off bad thoughts, it made the Romans look up to the Etruscans in absolute awe. The Romans literally called Etruria the mother of superstition, and here's why. The Etruscans divided the sky into exactly 16 distinct compartments. It's like a giant invisible grid. The major gods sat in the east, the mysterious gods of fate and destiny sat in the north, and malevolent, downright evil deities ruled the west. Every single piece of the heavens had a manager. Their pantheon of gods was wildly eclectic and, honestly, super fluid. You had Tinia, their Zeus-like lightning thrower. Then there's Minerva, who sounds a whole lot like the Roman Minerva. She dabbled in weather, war, prophecy, and health. But what really sets them apart is how flexible these gods were. They could be amorphous, they could be animals, they were even gender fluid, and they could literally cross into another god's 16th of the sky to merge roles. Take Terms, for example. He's their Hermes equivalent. He guided souls to the underworld by actually merging with Ida, the god of the underworld, who, amazingly, is depicted wearing a wolf's hat. Terms would literally transform into Terms-itis just to get the job done. It's fascinating. And that brings us to part 5, divining the god's will, reading the blueprint. Because the universe was intensely micromanaged by these gods sitting in their designated skyboxes, the Etruscans used that masterful Etrusca disciplina we talked about earlier to read the omens hidden in the sky, in the flight of birds, and even in plants. To give you an idea of how magical and precise this augury was, take the story of a famous 6th century B.C.E. augur named Attis Nevius. A garden owner wanted some ripe grapes, so Attis Nevius walks in, faces south, does some quick mental math, and divides the garden into 4 sections. Then he simply watches the flight patterns and listens to the sounds of the local birds to confidently cross off 3 of those sections. He repeatedly subdivides that last section, literally bird-watching his way down, until he magical locates one single tree holding a perfect, ripe cluster of grapes. That is how seriously they took the signs of nature. And wait until you see how this applies to the weather. Their lightning calendar was, frankly, brilliantly absurd. Unlike the Greeks, who really just had Zeus throwing bolts around, the Etruscans recognized 9 separate gods who could throw 11 entirely different types of lightning bolts. Because of this, every single thunderclap on a specific date meant something incredibly distinct. For instance, a storm on August 19th, that meant women and the servile class will undertake murders. June 7th, diseases will infect men, but not many will die. January 7th, slave revolt. You certainly never ignored a rainy day in ancient Etruria, that's for sure. But the Etruscans didn't just look up at the sky. They looked inside. They perfected the art of haruspicy. This was a Mesopotamian-inspired practice of predicting the future by closely examining the entrails, specifically the liver, of sacrificed animals. The incredibly trained priests who performed this were known as haruspixes. Okay, are you ready for the ultimate mind-blowing connection of this entire explainer? Archaeologists actually found a bronze artifact called the Piacenza liver, which was basically a pocket study guide for these priests. And what it shows is that the Etruscans divided the sheep's liver into the exact same 16 compartments as the sky. Every single section of that liver was engraved with the name of the god who ruled that specific part of the heavens. This perfectly encapsulates their beautiful micro to macro worldview. They genuinely believe that if you zoom in far enough on a liver or even the smallest, most common berry, you're going to find the exact 16-part blueprint of the entire universe. It's like a fractal. It's all the same thing, just scaled up or scaled down. And the crucial point here is that they didn't do this to change the future. Actually, scratch that. They knew they couldn't avoid their fate. They just wanted to read the liver to understand their precise role in the universe's grand, harmonious blueprint so they could act accordingly. Which leads us to our final part. Part 6, the fall of Etruria, squeezed out by empires. Unfortunately, just knowing your fate doesn't stop it from happening. From around 500 BCE onwards, the brilliant Etruscans found themselves completely squeezed out by creeping imperialism on all sides. Sure, they had early successes, like winning the Battle of Eulalia in 535 BCE. But soon after, despite having a hugely powerful navy, they faced a devastating combination of enemies. They lost their southern campaign to expanding Greek city-states in 524 BCE. Then Celtic invaders from Gaul attacked them from the north. And finally, the aggressively rising Roman Republic began attacking from below. The major Etruscan city of Veii fell in 396 BCE, and one by one, the lights went out as their independent city-states were swallowed up by Rome. The Etruscans may have eventually vanished, utterly absorbed by the very Roman Empire they helped build, but their quest to turn mundanity into divinity remains deeply inspiring to this day. They didn't just live in the world. They looked at the dirt, the birds, the rain, and the smallest plants, and they saw a magical, completely interconnected universe. It leaves us all to wonder, as you go about your day, what profound meaning might be hiding in the mundane world around you today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, next time you step outside, take a long look at the sky. You never know what you might see.